On March 30th, 1945, in Heidelberg, Germany, 23-year-old Ingrid Becker paused her fountain pen halfway through a line in her diary, capturing thoughts that could have led to her instant capture by withdrawing Wehrmacht troops if uncovered. The Americans bear no resemblance to the tales we heard. They offer actual chocolate, real stuff, and they grin at kids. Peering through the fractured pane of her household's flat, she had observed an event that clashed sharply with 6 years of Nazi indoctrination. Troops from the 63rd Infantry Division were handing out chocolate bars to local youngsters, not the tainted treats Goebbels had cautioned against, but authentic Hershey's that sparked joy in the children after months of silence. The GIs sported spotless attire, flashed bright smiles, and displayed none of the savagery Nazi leaders had forecasted for the U.S. takeover. Some 20,000 U.S. troops marched into Heidelberg that Good Friday without unleashing a single bullet. The academic hub had been labeled an open city to safeguard its ancient structures. Unbeknownst to the German ladies peering from draped windows or the incoming Americans, this instant would ignite one of the trickiest societal shifts in contemporary wartime control. A gradual erosion of divides between victors and vanquished, propelled merely by basic human impulses. The figures on romantic entanglements were etched not via army commands, but through wedding requests that would soon overwhelm U.S. base administrations. Within 18 months, 14,000 German females would seek unions with American troops, reshaping the paths of both countries indelibly. Germany's swift downfall that spring of 1945 propelled U.S. units into its urban centers quicker than expected. Frankfurt succumbed on March 29, 1945, to General Patton's Third Army. Heidelberg yielded the following day with zero opposition. Nuremberg, Nazism's emblematic core, toppled on April 20th, coinciding with Hitler's birthdate. Munich fell into Allied hands on April 30th, the very day Hitler ended his life in Berlin. Come July 4th, Independence Day, U.S. forces advanced into their assigned Berlin zone. Among the initial officers to set up lasting command posts was Colonel William W. Jawson, tasked with turning Heidelberg into the hub of U.S. oversight. His journal, unearthed in Army records years afterward, offered scholars the richest portrayal of initial U.S.-German exchanges from a command viewpoint. Initial contacts between U.S. personnel and German locals kicked off mere hours after the takeover. Private First Class James Morrison from Brooklyn, attached to the 3rd Infantry Division, penned a note to his mom on April 2, 1945. The locals gaze at us as if we're aliens from space. The females in particular appear stunned that we aren't the beasts they expected. An elderly woman wept when I assisted with her water pails. She repeated, "Dank, dank," endlessly. Yet, the deepest jolt stemmed from the wealth of U.S. provisions that Germans encountered. Corporal Robert Hayes, posted in Frankfurt, recorded the locals' responses. "They can't fathom our food supplies. Our K rations, which we gripe about non-stop, pack more protein than civilians here have glimpsed in ages. When we discard half-consumed portions, the kids scramble for the remnants." The vast U.S. war apparatus that surged into Germany embodied manufacturing power far beyond what locals could grasp. The 12th Army Group by itself included 1.3 million troops, backed by 460,000 vehicles that guzzled 1.25 million gallons of fuel each day. Every U.S. division boasted more transport trucks than a full German Army Corps. Even the dental unit caring for troops' oral health had more specialists than the entire region of Bavaria. President Franklin D. Roosevelt had directly advised General Dwight D. Eisenhower back in September 1944. The German populace overall needs to learn that their entire country joined an unlawful plot against the standards of contemporary society. This approach took shape in the non-fraternization rule, officially set in Joint Chiefs of Staff Directive 167, endorsed by President Truman on May 10, 1945. The rule stood firm. No U.S. troop could converse with a German grown-up unless for duty-related matters. Violations carried harsh punishments, a $65 penalty, matching a private's full monthly wage. Offenders risked court-martial and demotion. MPs received orders to scour avenues, green spaces, and eateries, detaining any Americans chatting with locals. Technical Sergeant William Barnes from the 82nd Airborne Division maintained a thorough log that endured among his belongings. The directive defies reality. We're embedded right in their midst. Local women handle our kitchens, scrub our quarters, launder our gear. How do we avoid interaction? Just yesterday, they slapped me with a fine for uttering, "Goo, we introduced Morgan to our cleaning staff, a 60-year-old grandma." The initial breach in the rule happened sooner than expected. On June 11, 1945, merely 5 weeks following Germany's capitulation, Eisenhower adjusted the directive to allow troops to interact with German kids. Images of GIs frolicking with local youth, showing them how to play baseball and handing out chocolate bars turned into everyday scenes throughout the occupied areas. Come July 1945, personnel were permitted to chat with grown-ups in open spaces, although stepping inside German residences was still off-limits. The full breakdown arrived on October 1, 1945, as Chef, the Supreme Headquarters Allied Expeditionary Force, lifted the fraternization prohibition completely, retaining only bans on weddings and staying in German houses. We realized it was finished when the dancing began, noted WAC Lieutenant Dorothy Patterson, based in Frankfurt. The service club began hosting dances back in August. German women showed up in their finest outfits, frequently their sole garments. The military police were meant to bar their entry, but they soon quit trying. By September, each event featured far more local women than American nurses. The period from winter 1946 to 1947 lodged in German recollections as the time of famine. The famine winter, with temps plunging to 25 degrees and fuel stocks depleted. Yet prior to this disaster, ordinary Germans endured near starvation, sparking a fresh system built on U.S. plenty. Standard allotments in the U.S. sector delivered 1,950 calories daily for typical recipients, yet hardly any locals met those criteria. Ex-Nazi affiliates got 1,250 calories. In truth, the average German scraped by on 700 to 1,000 calories each day. In contrast, U.S. troops enjoyed 4,000 calories per day, whereas German POWs in American facilities received 2,800 calories, almost triple the amount available to civilians. Maria Hoffman, a Munich-based secretary who eventually moved to Chicago, jotted down costs in her journal. A pound of butter fetches 250 Reichsmarks on the underground market, equivalent to my whole monthly wage, yet the American PX offers it for 26 cents. A pack of smokes costing a GI $1 sells for 1,000 Reichsmarks. We've turned into beggars on our own soil. The underground trade revolved around tobacco as money. U.S. cigarettes held such worth that local laborers frequently chose them over Reichsmarks for pay. Just one lucky strike could secure a loaf of bread. An entire carton might acquire a camera, gems, or treasured family items. Organized crooks known as Schieber set up supply lines, though everyday citizens joined in this cigarette trade as well. Ursula Meir, age 19 and serving as a typist at the U.S. base in Frankfurt, reflected in 1985. My U.S. supervisor gave me 120 Reichsmarks a month, plus extras like coffee, sweets, and smokes as bonuses. That coffee by itself was worth 500 Reichsmarks illegally. His generosity kept my household from famine. The gap showed up plainly all around. U.S. dining areas discarded more meals in a single day than German households witnessed weekly. Sergeant Anthony Romano from Philadelphia recorded, "We're instructed to douse scraps with bleach to stop Germans from consuming them. It's awful. Children stare as we ruin food amid their hunger. Nearly all of us skip the command when bosses aren't watching." Women in Germany during 1945 confronted conditions unparalleled in recent times. Among males aged 15 to 50, 4.8 million lay dead, 11 million remained in POW camps, and countless others bore injuries. In Berlin, females exceeded males by 2 million to 1 million. This imbalance led experts to term it the surplus women issue. Countless females facing bleak marriage odds in a culture offering scant options for singles economically. Elizabeth, an educator from Wiesbaden, recounted in a 1980 statement, "They dubbed us rubble women or Trümmerfrauen since we dismantled ruined structures using only our hands for 72 Reichsmarks a month. Teachers, office workers, retail clerks, we all took on identical tasks. Skilled women shifted to manual jobs due to lack of alternatives. Jobs with Americans provided relief from this relentless hardship. By December 1945, the U.S. forces hired 300,000 Germans, roughly 100,000 of them women in roles like secretaries, interpreters, switchboard operators, office aides, and housekeepers. These gigs offered triple the local pay and entry to U.S. supplies. Anna Brown, employed as an interpreter at Campbell Barracks in Heidelberg, remembered, "My U.S. pay was 200 Reichsmarks, but the true value lay in remnants from the officer's kitchen. One day's odds and ends nourished my mom, grandma, and 2 little brothers for 7 days. My fellow German colleagues and I meticulously bundled every crust of bread, every half-nibbled fruit to carry back. Still, such work carried social penalties. Ladies employed by Americans earned slurs like Ames's sweethearts, or worse, shales. Terms like Armen Mädchen or chocolate girls suggested that young women traded their bodies for candy. The phrase Veronica Duinker arose as a harsh joke, twisting venereal disease into a jab at females who allegedly were grateful to Americans for any kindness. Survival clashed with humiliation, as Gertrude Wagner, employed at an American vehicle depot, later recounted. Accepting jobs from Americans branded us as betrayers. Seeing Americans turned us into whores. Remaining at home to go hungry made us idiots. Victory was impossible. Turning luxury items into essential barter reshaped society in post-war Germany under occupation, U.S. troops held riches that stunned Germans. Bars of chocolate, quick brew coffee, tinned foods, smokes, sheer hosiery, and cleansers. These were things absent from daily German existence for years. Master Sergeant Dale Peterson, hailing from Iowa, meticulously logged the barter system. A single pair of nylon stockings traded for 10 potatoes or 5 pounds of meat, 1 pound of coffee swapped for a gentleman's outfit, a full pack of cigarettes fetched a wireless set or a photographic device. Households in Germany parted with antique treasures passed down generations just for everyday sustenance. The notorious coal convoys highlighted the dire straits. Desperate women scaled the sluggish freight cars to toss lumps of fuel to relatives below, facing lethal falls or capture. Once U.S. military police started patrolling those lines, females bartered assorted items to bribe the sentries into ignoring them. In a 1995 interview, Hannah Laura Schmidt reflected on the ethical dilemmas. "My pal Greta went out with a U.S. sergeant. He supplied her with sweets, java, and hosiery. She divided it all among 5 neighboring households. Did that make her a sex worker or a savior? Hunger blinded us to verdicts. The PX outlets, or post exchanges, stood as emblems of Yankee plenty. Restricted to U.S. forces, these shops showcased wares unseen in Germany since the conflict's outset. Juicy produce, cuts of beef, loaves of pale bread, sweets, apparel, electronics, and timepieces. Staffers from Germany who labored inside called them heavens. Peering into the PX displays felt like agony," remembered Brunhild Doe. U.S. spouses purchasing a dozen candy bars as local kids pleaded for crusts just beyond the glass. The Yanks meant no harm. It simply reflected their everyday routine. Yet their routine sparked our unattainable fantasy. Come fall of 1945, mingling between GIs and German ladies proved inevitable. Venues like service lounges and ballrooms sprouted throughout the U.S. sector, intended solely for troops, yet packed with local women over time. Spots such as the Feminine Palace in Frankfurt, the Haus Vaterland in Berlin, and various America House sites evolved into hubs of fresh societal norms. The soiree unfolded in familiar ways. Local gals showed up in whatever finery they could salvage, frequently reworked Wehrmacht attire, tinted dark or earthy hues, the sole cloth on hand. They'd picked up Yankee moves from bootleg periodicals and concealed broadcasts. Ensembles, usually made up of Teutonic players who'd covertly safeguarded swing platters during the Reich era, performed tunes by Glenn Miller, Benny Goodman, and Tommy Dorsey. Corporal Eugene Davis, out of Detroit, penned to Family that December of 1945. These German lasses crave the rhythm. For over a decade, authorities banned them from swaying to U.S. tunes. They recite lyrics from tracks they'd never officially heard. It's both poignant and wondrous. Those ballrooms offered far more than diversion. They served as arenas for affection and sustenance deals. Provost logs captured the transactions in these settings. Entry for German attendees frequently got covered by GIs. A single twirl might snag a chocolate slab. Hours of company could bring Java and tobacco. An ongoing bond often secured a household's livelihood. Ilse, who encountered her future U.S. spouse at a Frankfurt ballroom in 1946, captured the vibe. We acted like it centered on melodies and steps, though the reality was clear to all. Orphans or independents swirled for delight. Those with famished kin moved for provisions. The soldiers grasped it fully. But options were scarce. That was our world. Rules against unions between Americans and Germans sparked administrative chaos and personal heartbreak. Countless pairs formed attachments in defiance of orders, sparking intricate plots to dodge army statutes. Certain troops forged papers asserting their partners were refugees from elsewhere. Some set up stand-in weddings via U.S. attorneys. Others cohabited covertly, courting military trials. Reform demands arose from surprising quarters. Army clergy, at first against such liaisons, shifted to championing wedding permissions following sessions with numerous earnest duos. Chaplain Major Thomas Anderson noted in a formal document, "These aren't spoils of battle or prizes. I've wed these fellows prior to fights and mourned them afterward. They merit freedom to select their partners." On December 11, 1946, restrictions eased at last, albeit with stipulations. German women aiming to wed Americans endured thorough scrutiny. Officials conducted political screenings for any ties to Nazis, required physical checkups, character endorsements, and evidence of genuine romance over financial gain. The procedure lasted at least 3 months and frequently extended far beyond that. Just a day after the prohibition ended, armed forces bases were flooded with 2,500 requests to wed. Come January 1947, applications climbed to 7,000. Every submission demanded 15 distinct forms, a trio of health assessments, and questioning by security personnel. Margaretta Thompson, wed to Sergeant James Thompson in 1947, recounted the indignity. "They inquired whether I was a Nazi, if my folks were Nazis, if I'd gone out with German troops, if I was tying the knot for cash, if I was expecting. They dissected my whole existence as though I were a felon. Jimmy fumed, yet I assured him enduring it was worthwhile for our union." Enacted on December 28, 1945, the War Brides Act at first barred German women completely. Citizens of Japan and Germany were explicitly prohibited. Only through amendments in 1946 and 1947 could German war brides gain legal entry to the U.S. Even afterward, the ordeal proved excruciating. The initial batch of German war brides, 317 females and 147 youngsters, sailed from Bremerhaven aboard the USAT Henry Gibbons on February 3, 1947. On average, they had lingered 8 months post-wedding before approval to relocate. Plenty had seldom ventured beyond their native regions, yet here they were, traversing the Atlantic to a nation where animosity toward Germans lingered strong. Ruth Patterson, née Mueller, documented her trip in a journal. February 3rd, queasy and frightened. The Red Cross staff from America are gracious, though fellow travelers shun us upon detecting our accents. One lady hawked spit at me once she realized my origins. February 10th, spotted the Statue of Liberty, wept for an hour, unsure whether from elation or dread. Vessels were typically repurposed military carriers, straightforward yet tidy. Brides occupied quarters designed for 4 but crammed with 6 or 8. Kids got placed in play areas. Numerous women carried pregnancies. Army rules stipulated that expectant mothers sail prior to their 7th month or hold off until postpartum. The crossing spanned 13 days of apprehension, as Hannelore Williams, née Schmidt, remembered. We drilled one another on English sayings. "Thank you for welcoming me. Delighted to make your acquaintance. I'll prove a devoted spouse." We dreaded airing in the States. Landing in America introduced fresh hurdles. Plenty of war brides learned their spouses had exaggerated their situations. A prosperous U.S. entrepreneur might translate to a fuel pump operator. A vast Iowa ranch could signify a leased space over a shed. Certain partners hid undissolved marriages. Others contended with kin who rejected German in-laws. Data on migration reveals some insights. From 1946 to 1950, roughly 14,000 German females entered as war brides, yet figures fail to convey personal hardships. In areas boasting sizable German-American communities, like Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and Ohio, fitting in proved smoother. In rural spots rife with prejudice against Germans, these women confronted shunning, intimidation, and solitude. Martha Davis, née Becker, reached Alabama in 1947. My spouse's relatives boycotted me for half a year. Locals hurled Nazi at me en route to the market. The grocer snubbed me until patrons protested. John stood by me, but his shifts stretched endlessly. I sobbed daily throughout the first year. Still, triumphs surfaced too. German war brides brought talents, fluency in tongues, musical abilities, artisanal skills that gradually earned respect. They built mutual aid circles, gathering at places of worship and social hubs to exchange tales and uphold customs from home. Numerous dove into local life, participating in PTA meetings, religious circles, and public bodies. We needed to excel flawlessly, noted Ingrid Johnson, née last name unclear. Ideal spouses, ideal parents, ideal citizens. A single slip stained not only ourselves, but every German woman. Failure wasn't an option. On June 20, 1948, a pivotal shift reshaped ties between Germans and Americans. Economic overhaul swapped the valueless Reichsmark for the Deutsche Mark, swiftly bolstering stability. Every citizen got 40 fresh marks, equivalent to around $10. The mental uplift, however, was profound. It felt like sorcery, Ursula Henderson, née Müller, reflected. Friday, stores stood barren. Monday, shelves brimmed. Abruptly, purchasing became feasible. No longer did we barter our integrity or self-respect for sustenance. Employment, income, and shopping resumed like everyday affairs. The underground economy crumbled in a flash. Tobacco sticks reverted to mere smokes, not barter goods. U.S. troops quit reigning as monarchs on their pay. German ladies who had pursued Yankees out of necessity could now pursue bonds out of fondness. Captain William Stewart, head of military law enforcement in Frankfurt, observed. The whole interplay shifted over a single weekend. German women who once pursued any American aggressively now grew discerning. Our soldiers truly had to woo those women. Bouquets, fine dining, sincere attention. It started feeling a lot like romance stateside. The rebound in the economy was astonishing. Factory output surged by 50% in just half a year. Joblessness plummeted from 20% down to 5%. Women in Germany shifted back to conventional roles like education, healthcare, and administrative positions, earning fair pay. The days of the rubble clearers drew to a close as builders brought in skilled teams. This shift in prosperity reshaped ties between Germans and Americans in profound ways. Prior to the money overhaul, we acted like paupers, recalled Anna Coleman, née Brown. Afterward, we stood as equals. My bond with Tom evolved from reliance to balance. That's the moment I realized a true union was possible. Heidelberg turned into the unofficial hub for cross-cultural courtships. Spared from the air raids, the town held the biggest cluster of U.S. troops across Europe. Come 1950, it was home to 20,000 GIs and 5,000 dependents, turning the ancient academic center into a hybrid cultural lab. Campbell Barracks, repurposed from the Wehrmacht's Großdeutschland Kaserne on August 23, 1948, evolved into a standalone U.S. enclave. Mark Twain Village, constructed from 1948 onward, offered homey, suburb-like residences for American households. Its retail hub, finished in 1951, included a U.S.-style grocery, hair parlor, and malt shop, draws that lured inquisitive locals even though it was restricted. The local college served a special function. U.S. officers signed up for classes in Teutonic thought and writings, while native pupils instructed English to the troops' spouses. Professor Wilhelm Hoffman, who lectured to American learners from 1947 through 1965, noted how the lecture halls turned into impartial zones where old foes debated Goethe and the Bard on level terms. Love stories bloomed amid Heidelberg's distinctive vibe. Strolls along the Neckar River Walkway, palace grounds, and campus pubs offered ideal spots for wooing that were out of reach in war-torn spots like Frankfurt or Mannheim. Brass estimated that 30% of GIs posted in Heidelberg over 6 months formed deep connections with local ladies. Lisa Morgan, née Simon, who crossed paths with her future spouse there in 1949, recalled how Heidelberg felt like a dream persisting through horror. The fortress, the historic span, the youthful ballads. It evoked the enchanting old world for Yanks. We could imagine the conflict had never occurred, if only for a night. Frankfurt rose as the financial core of the post-war era. The IG Farben edifice, the continent's grandest business tower, served as U.S. command post from March 1945. The colossal site, once base for the firm behind Zyklon B, now oversaw aid under the Marshall Initiative and efforts to purge Nazis. The influx of Americans recast Frankfurt as a Main River version of Manhattan. By 1949, 15,000 Yanks occupied seized lodgings, forming full-fledged U.S. districts. The Platten housing development by itself had 787 units reserved solely for American kin. Such pockets came with Yankee comforts, radiant heat, updated cooking areas, and play zones, perks that locals wouldn't see for years. The Frankfurt PX grew into the biggest military exchange beyond U.S. borders. Local staff called it a slice of America within Deutschland. It hired 500 Germans, forging early venues where foes collaborated as peers instead of rulers and ruled. Margaret Anderson, née Schultz, who labored at the Frankfurt PX, encountered her partner on the job in 1950. The exchange felt like common soil. Within its confines, we shed the labels of victors and vanquished. We were simply fellow employees. That's where genuine bonds and flings took root. Frankfurt's evening scene revolved around the jazz Keller spots that popped up in ruined cellars. These spots, formerly banned yet overlooked by officials, showcased native players delivering Yankee jazz to diverse crowds. The Hot Club of Frankfurt, launched in 1947, gained fame for its weekend improv nights, blending U.S. servicemen with German artists into fresh artistic blends. Roughly 94,000 kids came into the world from German moms and Allied dads over the occupation years, with U.S. sires fathering about 37,000. These offspring of the era, known as Besatzungskinder, confronted distinct hurdles in a nation grappling with self-definition. Those with fair-skinned American dads often blended in smoother, particularly when unions followed. Yet around 5,000 had black U.S. fathers, enduring harsh bias in a land lacking a notable African community and haunted by fascist racial doctrines. Hans Johnson, arriving in 1947 from a German parent and African-American dad, depicted his early years. I got labeled Neger Mischling, black mongrel, every day. Instructors isolated me in class. Not one German family let their kids mingle with mine. My mom got fired from positions when many mothers were shocked to learn they had given birth to children of mixed race. Others decided to send their biracial offspring to orphanages in hopes they might be adopted by families in the United States. The initiative known as the Brown Baby Plan, started by African-American reporter Mabel Grammer, managed to resettle around 500 German children of mixed heritage with black American households in the U.S. from 1951 through 1953. My mom handed me over when I was just 3, remembered Dorothy Brown, who got adopted in 1952. She sent me a note that I got on my 18th birthday, saying she adored me, but felt she couldn't offer me a proper life in Germany. She was spot on. My new parents in Chicago opened doors for me that would have been out of reach in Germany during the 1950s. Starting in 1945, the America House Initiative set up cultural hubs in key German urban areas to promote democracy by introducing folks to U.S. ideals. Come 1950, there were 5 primary locations running in Berlin, Frankfurt, Munich, Hamburg, and Stuttgart, plus smaller library outposts in scores of additional towns. These spots gave Germans their initial taste of everyday American living outside the lens of the armed forces' presence. The collections featured titles that had been prohibited during the Nazi era, including Hemingway, Steinbeck, and pieces by Jewish writers. Movie showings included classic Hollywood films alongside docs on U.S. democratic principles. Lessons in English, frequently led by spouses of service members, drew in huge crowds of learners. The Munich branch, which debuted in 1946, turned out to be the biggest hit, pulling in 80,000 guests each month by 1950. Its head, Robert McNamara, not the later defense chief, noted, "The Germans crave U.S. culture. They flock to talks on democracy, participate in forums about federal systems, and borrow volumes on U.S. past. This represents soft power in its purest form." The program for German youth focused on teens and young adults between 14 and 25. Centers run by the GYA provided activities like athletics, arts and crafts, music sessions, and, most favored, dance parties. These overseen gatherings offered safe spaces for mingling between Germans and Americans, helping curb spontaneous and unregulated mingling. Brigitte Cooper-Navana, who crossed paths with her future spouse at a GYA event in 1951, recalled that those dances were the sole spots our folks let us hang out with Yanks. They came with adult supervisors, wrapped up at 10 p.m., and only had non-alcoholic beverages. Still, we picked up U.S. dance moves like the jitterbug and swing, and it made us feel linked to a bigger global scene. As the post-war control moved from retribution to forging partnerships, the armed forces rules adapted to include family units. By 1950, roughly 30s and U.S. military relatives were residing in Germany. These households, particularly the women, acted as informal envoys, dismantling divides via routine contacts. Service spouses hired local German help, made purchases in neighborhood shops whenever allowed, and even sent kids to German classrooms if the on-base ones were too full. Such ordinary exchanges softened the image of the occupation for everyone involved. Dorothy Mitchell, a service member's wife based in Frankfurt between 1949 and 1952, shared in her personal account, "My housekeeper, Frau Kleine, showed me more about the real Germany than any prep session ever could. She guided me in preparing traditional German dishes, shared insights on regional traditions, and turned into a close companion. When she opened up about her boy lost in Russia, it hit me that these weren't foes, but simply bereaved moms, no different from any place else." In 1950, the forces launched clubs for German American women, uniting service wives with local ladies for shared cultural experiences. These groups arranged fundraisers, swap sessions for languages, and casual meetups that sparked enduring bonds. Observers like Colonel James Patterson, the relations coordinator, remarked that the ladies' groups tore down walls quicker than any formal effort. Whenever U.S. and German moms chatted about kid health woes, education hassles, or spousal issues, the political stuff just faded away. As the control period transitioned from takeover to partnership, the bonds between U.S. troops and German ladies shifted in tandem. The survival-driven deals of 1945 to 1948, swapping rations for company, eased into standard romances following economic reforms. By 1950, a fresh dynamic took shape. GIs posted in Germany for 2-year stints now had bandwidth to build authentic connections. German women, past the point of sheer desperation, could select mates out of genuine interest instead of need. This led to a sharp rise in honest, enduring pairings. Logs from military chaplains capture the shift. Weddings climbed from 2,000 in 1947 to 5,000 in 1950, and breakups among these cross-cultural unions fell from 30% to 15%, aligning with typical U.S. home stats. Sergeant Michael O'Brien, who wed his German partner in 1951, described the difference. "Back in '46, soldiers tied the knot with women they hardly knew out of pity or a desire to assist. By '51, we'd court for months, visit homes, pick up the lingo. These turned into solid bonds." The outbreak of the Korean War in June 1950 added pressure to plenty of romances. Troops eyeing overseas duty popped the question hastily, causing a surge in nuptials. Yet these conflict-era unions held up better than expected. Service files indicate 70% endured beyond 2 decades. By 1955, when West Germany restored its independence and became a NATO member, around 20 German women had already moved to the United States as spouses of American service members. Their adjustment to life in America differed greatly, depending on where they lived, their schooling, and how welcoming local groups were. In urban areas boasting strong German-American heritage, these wartime brides encountered supportive networks. Milwaukee's German enclave, Cincinnati's over-the-Rhine area, and St. Louis's German clubs offered comforting elements like native cuisine, spoken language, and traditions. These brides frequently served as links connecting long-standing German-American groups to the current reality of Germany. Emma Roberts. Née Fisher, arriving in Milwaukee in 1949, rose to lead the German-American Ladies' Society by 1960. The established German Americans at first viewed us with bitterness, seeing us as echoes of the Nazi period. Yet we carried forward present-day German ways, distinct from the outdated customs handed down from their ancestors. Over time, we breathed new energy into those communities. Life in countryside settings brought distinct obstacles. Brides in remote villages frequently stood as the sole Germans for considerable distances, contending with loneliness and distrust. Certain ones never truly blended in, upholding German practices in private while outwardly adopting American habits. I turned into two different people, shared Katharina Brown-Schmidt after establishing herself in rural Arkansas. Inside our home, I stayed German, preparing traditional dishes, conversing in German with the kids, upholding German holiday observances. Beyond the door, I acted thoroughly American, participating in the PTA, aiding church events, and avoiding any reference to my origins. These German wartime brides unexpectedly enriched American education systems. A significant number held more advanced learning than typical U.S. residents. Graduates of gymnasium were fluent in several tongues, versed in classical compositions, and familiar with works in literature and philosophy. Educators in various districts recognized that German brides excelled as instructors, especially in linguistics and the arts. By 1960, hundreds were employed in U.S. classrooms, bringing enhanced techniques for language teaching and methods drawn from European classical learning. Dr. Margaretta Williams, née Hoffman, now a German instructor at an Ohio high school, transformed how languages were taught. Conventional U.S. approaches focused on rules and direct translation. I brought in spoken German practice, deep cultural engagement, and programs for student visits abroad. My pupils didn't merely acquire the language, they gained insight into German heritage. The brides also shaped everyday American family dynamics. They popularized German Yuletide customs, Advent wreaths, holiday bazaars, and baking rituals that eventually entered mainstream U.S. practices. Techniques for German meal preparation, home organization, and raising children quietly permeated suburban American lifestyles. We only noticed our impact much later, mused Ingrid Thomas née Bow. Our U.S. neighbors began brewing genuine coffee rather than using instant mixes, preparing fresh loaves, and tending vegetable plots. We delivered timeless European abilities to a nation fixated on quick fixes. The emotional evolution of these German women marrying Americans highlighted impressive endurance. They coped with layered hardships, enduring conflict and airstrikes, bearing the hardships of occupation and hardship, departing their native land and kin, acclimating to an alien society, and confronting bias. Research in psychiatry from the 1950s noted elevated instances of melancholy and worry among the brides, yet also striking powers of adjustment. Dr. William Henderson's 1955 examination of 500 German war brides revealed that 60% expressed full contentment with their American existence after 5 years, up from 40% after just 1 year. Transitioning from symbols of a vanquished foe to U.S. nationals demanded a total overhaul of their inner selves. As Dr. Henderson observed, these women refashioned their identities, setting aside their German roots while safeguarding German essence, a delicate equilibrium that called for exceptional mental adaptability. Numerous war brides kept their stories sealed, even from their offspring. This reticence arose from various roots: embarrassment over Germany's role in the war, apprehension of U.S. bigotry, and a wish to shield youngsters from harsh pasts. Barbara Miller, child of one such bride, uncovered her parents' backstory solely following her passing in 1995. I uncovered correspondence in German, images of devastated urban landscapes, and a journal detailing starvation and terror. My parent avoided German speech at home, omitted talk of relatives, and concealed her sorrow upon encountering German tunes. She wiped away her former self to fully embrace American identity. In the midst of Cold War strains, German war brides unwittingly acted as cultural envoys. With rising conflicts against the Soviet bloc, these women softened Americans' perceptions of Germany, countering simplistic views of Europeans. Their offspring, representing the next wave, commonly facilitated cross-cultural ties. Plenty delved into German academia, took up roles as interpreters, or entered global commerce. Army documentation indicates that children of these brides joined the military more frequently than the U.S. norm, frequently seeking postings in Germany. Lieutenant Colonel James Muller, whose mother was a German war as the child of a war bride, I benefited from my mother's experiences, which outshone even the most detailed Army orientations in readying me for life in Germany. She had acted as a liaison officer there between 1975 and 1980. Her tales gave me insight into the German mindset, fluency in the tongue, and familiarity with local customs. Offspring of war brides turned into key resources amid the Cold War tensions. Their impact reached far past armed forces duties. Such children frequently entered fields like global diplomacy, interpreting services, and cross-border commerce. Leading companies sought them out for roles in German branches, valuing their distinctive dual cultural perspective. We embodied innate global citizens, noted Professor Maria Anderson, whose own mother arrived in 1948 as an immigrant. Raised to bridge cultural gaps, we clarified the U.S. to our German kin while decoding Germany for American pals. This upbringing equipped us for worldwide jobs long before the idea of globalization took hold. The 1980s brought an intriguing trend: war brides heading back to Germany after years apart. Affordable flights, better diplomatic ties, and more free time in retirement made these trips feasible in ways they hadn't been before. Such homecomings mixed joy and sorrow. Returning women often faced families split by the Iron Curtain, villages reshaped beyond recognition, and kin who either romanticized or held grudges against their U.S. existences. A few achieved forgiveness and harmony, while others met ongoing bitterness. In 1985, after 38 years away, Hannelore Davis née Schmidt went back to Hamburg. My sibling had spread word that I'd ditched the family for lavish American perks, she shared. The reality that I'd wired funds for 2 decades, my spouse toiled in a plant, and we faced hardships, clashed with their story. Though tough, the gathering proved essential. Certain war brides coordinated collective trips, even renting aircraft to revisit their roots as a group. These gatherings offered mutual comfort when tackling tough recollections and altered surroundings. The biggest such event, arranged by the German War Brides Association of America in 1987, ferried 300 women to Germany for a fortnight's excursion. "Traveling as one fortified our resolve," said planner Christina Thomas. "We divided the surprise over transformations, mourned the missing, and savored the meetups." Solo visits could prove harrowing, but communal ones brought solace. The figures reveal a profound societal shift. On marriages. Between 1946 and 1955, 14,000 to 20,000 German women wed U.S. troops. The high point came in 1946, with roughly 2,500 unions. About 70% of these lasted more than 20 years, exceeding the typical 50 U.S. rate. Roughly 15% dissolved in divorce inside 5 years, and another 15% via soldiers' deaths in Korea or later duties. For immigration, the initial vessel sailed on February 3, 1947, carrying 317 women. The busiest year, 1949, saw 3,500 newcomers. On average, 8 months passed from wedding to arrival. 60% chose city life, 40% rural or small-town settings in America. By location, New York hosted 2,500 war brides, California 2,000, Texas 800, Pennsylvania 500, Illinois 200, Wisconsin 1,000, Ohio 900, and the rest of the states 5,100. Regarding offspring, around 37,000 kids came from American dads and German moms. 5,000 were of mixed heritage with African-American fathers. 500 mixed-race children got adopted by U.S. families. 80% of recognized children joined their mothers in immigrating, while 20% stayed in Germany with family. Work trends. In 1946, 300,000 Germans worked for the U.S. military. 100,000 German women filled admin positions. Monthly pay averaged 120 Reichsmarks for locals versus 200 Reichsmarks plus perks for Americans in similar jobs. Post-1948 currency changes leveled salaries in about 2 years. Interactions between German women and American GIs in the aftermath of World War II sparked enduring changes across both nations. These partnerships, forged in extraordinary times, shattered biases from wartime, overcame familial and societal barriers, and erected personal links between once hostile peoples. In the early post-war era, marked by frantic efforts to survive and bans on mingling, relationships shifted toward true intercultural dialogue as economies rebounded and politics stabilized. The 14,000 to 20,000 German women who tied the knot with U.S. servicemen navigated hurdles from red tape to public shunning. Still, most blended seamlessly into American life. Their kids, representing the next wave, emerged as instinctive cultural envoys, aiding German-U.S. ties through the Cold War and into later decades. Numerous took up global professions, drawing on their bilingual, bicultural edge in a world growing ever more connected. "We were historical flukes who evolved into peacemakers," mused Anna Patterson née Muller during a 1995 gathering of war brides. "Our unions, sparked by wartime turmoil, aided in forging lasting harmony. Our offspring served as links across old divides. Our stories showed that personal bonds outlast borders of enmity." By 1955, as the occupation wrapped up and West Germany entered NATO, German-American dynamics had shifted irrevocably. The urgent liaisons of 1945, fueled by famine and isolation, had evolved into alliances among former foes. The German women who once sifted through debris for meager pay amid hunger now served as valued staff in U.S. facilities. Individuals who had bartered self-respect for sweets could now purchase goods using Deutsche Marks in revitalizing markets. The soldier's companion, who endured rejection for romancing Americans, began to view U.S.-German camaraderie as official state doctrine. Wolfgang Petersen, offspring of a German war spouse, depicted this shift in his 2000 film Bridges of Love. "The women of my mother's era forged connections through their physical efforts and affections that governments failed to erect. They faced scorn, isolation, praise, and in the end, justification. Their intimate decisions shaped broader historical currents. The post-war occupation era uncovered essential insights into humanity amid dire circumstances. As survival hangs in the balance, societal divides crumble. Once essential requirements are satisfied, authentic bonds can emerge. When ex-adversaries engage person to person instead of as collectives, harmony ensues." The scale of the German-American interactions during the occupation in Germany is evident in key figures that highlight the extent of change and its enduring effects. Peak strength of occupation troops, 1.6 million U.S. service members in May 1945. Settled occupation numbers, 200,000 from 1946 to 1950. U.S. military personnel remaining in Germany, 30,000 by 1950. German workers employed by U.S. forces, 300,000 in 1946. Overall Americans passing through the occupation, 3 million between 1945 and 1955. Economic gaps. Daily rations for German civilians ranged from 1,000 to 1,550 calories. U.S. troops received 4,000 calories per day. Typical German monthly earnings, 120 Reichsmarks. A black market pack of cigarettes cost 1,000 Reichsmarks. PX cost for the equivalent pack, $1, about 10 Reichsmarks at the official exchange. Social shifts. Dance venues running in the U.S. sector reached 450 by 1947. Monthly visitors to America houses, 80,000 in Munich during 1950. Participants in German youth activities, 250,000 each year. German-American women's groups, 85 branches by 1952. Individuals in cultural exchange initiatives, 500,000 from 1945 to 1955. Outcomes of relationships, marriage requests on the first legal day, 2,500. Overall unions during the occupation, 14,000 to 20,000. War brides moving to the U.S., 14,000 verified. Offspring from German-American unions, 37,000. Children of mixed heritage, 5,000. Adoptions to the U.S. that succeeded, 500. Locations of influence. Primary occupation hubs included Frankfurt, Heidelberg, Munich, Stuttgart, and Berlin. Heidelberg's American community, 20,000 steady residents. Frankfurt's commandeered offices, 3,700. Campbell Barracks troop capacity, 10,000 soldiers. Mark Twain Village's residences, 800 units. Patrick Henry Village's expanse, 97.5 hectares. Personal accounts from German women who endured the occupation lend a personal touch to these numerical records. Their narratives, captured in correspondence, journals, and spoken recollections, expose the intricacies of enduring, adjusting, and evolving. Lisa Lotto Williams, interviewed by N. Kruger in 1990, offered profound perspectives. Folks nowadays can't grasp the hopelessness of 1945. My dad perished in Russia. My sibling vanished in combat. Our home lay in ruins. At 19, I was schooled, fluent in English, yet jobs were scarce beyond rubble removal for 72 Reichsmarks a month, barely sufficient for sustenance. When Americans sought interpreters, 500 applicants vied for 10 spots. Fortune favored me. My high school English caught their eye. Abruptly, I drew 200 Reichsmarks plus entry to the mess hall. Fellow women labeled me Ami Hur, American whore, even as I merely handled paperwork. I encountered Bill on the job. He showed gentleness and courtesy, contrasting the vile tropes from Nazi broadcasts. We courted in hiding for 6 months. Fraternization remained prohibited. By 1947, when marriage became feasible, my mother cut ties with me. She accused me of disloyalty to the fatherland. She never knew her grandkids. In the States, another bias awaited. Bill's relatives in Iowa mourned a boy lost at Normandy. His mom questioned if my kin were Nazis. Upon hearing how my father fell in a conflict he opposed, she wept and held me close. In that instant, I truly joined America. My kids matured speaking 2 languages and embracing dual cultures. My girl took up interpreting for the State Department. My boy joined the Army and posted to Germany. They erected spans beyond my imagination. That's the inheritance we share. From debris clearers to architects of unity within a single lifetime. Commanders in the military grappled with overseeing the swift developments between U.S. troops and local Germans. Early directives rooted in penalties and isolation buckled under innate drives and real-world demands. General Lucius Clay, overseer of the U.S. sector, quietly admitted the pointlessness of anti-fraternization rules. Youthful soldiers and local women will connect no matter the edicts. We must guide these encounters productively or risk disorder. Setting up sanctioned spaces, like service lounges, America houses, and GYA hubs, signified a realistic nod to unavoidable mingling. These regulated settings, canteens offered secure options compared to clandestine clubs and illicit dealings. Documents from military police in 1946 highlighted the extent of the difficulties. It's unfeasible to uphold the ban on fraternization without undermining soldiers' spirits. Troops with outstanding battlefield achievements risked court-martial simply for conversing with local Germans. At the same time, unregulated interactions thrived unchecked. Transitioning from strict bans to managed oversight turned out effective. Rates of venereal diseases, which had surged to 250 cases per 1,000 troops in the closing months of 1945, fell sharply to 50 per 1,000 by 1948, thanks to the introduction of monitored gathering spots and health awareness initiatives. The currency overhaul in June 1948 didn't merely steady finances, it reshaped interactions between U.S. personnel and Germans. In an instant, the imbalance between conquerors and the conquered evolved toward mutual respect. Margot Henderson. Ney Brown captured the swift shift. On Saturday, June 19th, I pondered taking on a role as an officer's companion just to feed my family. By Monday, June 21st, I secured legitimate employment with fair pay. The sense of urgency vanished in a flash. All at once, we could pursue connections based on affection, not necessity. U.S. servicemen observed the difference too. In a July 1948 letter home, Sergeant Paul Anderson noted, "The local women transformed instantly. Previously, they'd go out with anybody for sweets. Nowadays, they're choosy. A soldier without much to offer faces rejection. They're seeking genuine bonds, not handouts. Financial rebound allowed traditional romantic pursuits to resume. Eateries started operating again, taking Deutsche Marks instead of barter goods like smokes. Theaters screened both domestic and U.S. movies. Venues for dancing ran as businesses, free from army funding. Courtship turned from mere exchanges into authentic experiences. Such developments led to more enduring unions. Weddings before the currency change had a 30% dissolution rate in the first 5 years. Those after showed just 15%, indicating that steady finances supported wiser choices in partners. The roughly 37,000 offspring from German women and American dads encountered distinct struggles. Kids whose parents wed obtained U.S. nationality and frequently relocated. The bulk, left behind by their sires, stayed in Germany as marginalized figures. Klaus Thompson, born in 1947, shared his story. My mom claimed to neighbors that my dad perished in battle, yet my appearance screamed foreign. Classmates taunted me as a Yankee mongrel. Educators overlooked the harassment. No trade program took me on. It wasn't until my 1968 move to track down my father that I broke free from the disgrace. Children of mixed heritage endured extra difficulties. Lingering Nazi racial doctrines left German communities unprepared to embrace black locals. Parents felt coerced to commit these youngsters to institutions or arrange overseas adoptions. The 1952 movie Toxie, focusing on a biracial child from the occupation era, drew widespread notice to their woes, though it perpetuated biases. Depicting the youngster as an issue needing resolution instead of a rightful resident mirrored the era's views. Still, certain biracial occupation kids triumphed over barriers. Hans-Jürgen Massaquoi, offspring of a German parent and a Liberian one, though not U.S.-linked, rose to prominence as a reporter and chronicled his life as a black individual in Nazi-era and Reconstruction Germany, amplifying parallel tales. U.S. troops brought cultural shifts extending past tunes like jazz or treats such as gum. Local women employed by or wed to Americans served as bridges for deep societal evolution. The relaxed U.S. approach questioned rigid German structures. Secretaries in Germany began using given names with officers, a practice unimaginable in native workplaces. Servicemen engaged with German youth as peers, not underlings. Such exchanges illustrated egalitarian bonds. Americans showed us it was okay to challenge leaders, remembered Bridget Coleman, née Fisher. My U.S. supervisor sought my views on workplace routines. No local boss had ever cared for my input. It felt like a breakthrough. The notion that everyday folks' ideas counted. U.S. habits of consumption also altered German aspirations. Post-exchange shelves revealed plenty unimaginable to locals. Periodicals passed from army households to German staff portrayed idyllic neighborhoods with gadgets, cars, and pastimes. These visions spurred rebuilding efforts. The 1950s boom wasn't solely industrial. It redefined what was achievable. Women exposed to American ways pushed for comparable ease and utility, spurring buying trends that accelerated revival. Army clergy unexpectedly influenced U.S.-German ties. Though first against mixing, numerous shifted to supporting cross-border pairs upon seeing authentic connections form amid rules. Chaplain Thomas O'Brien's 1947 account. These connections spurred shifts in official guidelines. I have advised countless pairs through their unions. These weren't mere flings or casual arrangements, but profound affections. Women from Germany faced social exile, U.S. Troops endangered their careers with potential military trials. Still, they carried on. Such endurance points to heavenly favor over mere carnal urges. Places of worship turned into impartial spaces for encounters. From 1946 onward, chapels on bases welcomed curious young Germans eager to explore U.S. Protestant practices. Local congregations that welcomed American-led worship saw GIs donating substantially to rebuilding efforts. Unions across faiths added further hurdles. Weddings between Catholics and Protestants demanded rare permissions. Jewish servicemen pursuing German partners endured extra suspicion amid the fresh scars of history. Nevertheless, romance crossed denominational lines, just as it had overcome national divides. Our shared beliefs served as the connector. shared Ruth Anderson, Nagna, a Lutheran wed to a Catholic staff sergeant. Doctrine divided us, yet we aligned on principles like family, duty, kindness, and empathy. That base held our bond together for 4 decades. The 10 years of U.S. oversight reshaped communities on both sides of the Atlantic. Somewhere between 14,000 and 20,000 German women who wed American military personnel forged lasting ties between once hostile nations. Their 37,000 offspring grew into vibrant cultural connectors. On a broader scale, the presence reshaped German life. Contact with U.S. ideals of governance, consumerism, and relaxed interactions guided the evolution of the Federal Republic. The post-war boom in Germany extended beyond factories and trade. It included a cultural shift drawn from American examples. Americans experienced subtler transformations as well. These brides brought habits of precision, a focus on learning, and European customs that vitalized local neighborhoods. Their kids frequently turned into experts in cross-border affairs, bolstering U.S. involvement worldwide through the Cold War era and later. "Oh, we acted as envoys," mused Christina Patterson, Namuller, during a 2000 gathering of veterans. "Our partnerships went beyond private decisions. They shaped epochal shifts. We demonstrated how adversaries could evolve into partners. Animosity could yield to affection. Ruin could give way to renewal." Scholars view the German-U.S. bonds from 1945 to 1955 as pivotal to the occupation's triumphs and the alliances that followed. In contrast to stern controls that fueled bitterness, the U.S. practical stance on personal interactions fostered healing. Dr. Maria Hearn, a foremost expert on these eras' liaisons, asserts, "Those unions between German women and American troops achieved what formal accords could not: personal harmony among ex-foes. Starting from isolation and need, these ties matured into true collaborations that exemplified egalitarian partnerships. The divergence from the Soviet approach offers key lessons. Though Red Army personnel engaged with German women too, bans on official ties and no paths to matrimony blocked deep commitments. In the U.S. sector, moving from bans to endorsement built connections that lasted. Detractors highlight the ties' flaws, including unequal dynamics, financial pressures, deserted offspring. Even so, experts generally agree that allowing valid partnerships was kinder and more effective than enforcing unfeasible restrictions. In 1995, marking 50 years since the occupation concluded, the enduring war brides convened their biggest assembly in Washington, D.C. More than 500, now in their later years as grandmothers, came together to recount tales long kept private. The main address came from Ingrid Morrison, nab Becca, whose diary launched this narrative. She pondered their path. "We were youthful figures at a pivotal historical moment, vanquished yet resilient, needy yet dignified. We picked affection instead of resentment, optimism over gloom, tomorrow over yesterday. They branded us as climbers, betrayers. None of that fit. We endured and then created. Our unions spanned divides. Our kids turned into global citizens. Our existences showed adversaries don't have to stay that way. To our girls and granddaughters, we passed a blended legacy not as a weight, but a gift. You hold German and American roots. You grasp that loyalty to country doesn't demand disdain for outsiders. You see, romance defies frontiers. To scholars, avoid idealizing our tales. We endured prejudice, desertion, loneliness. Countless peers succumbed to the streets, self-harm, or despair. We who persisted bear their shadows with our victories. To critics, step into our lives, confront famine, shelling, foreign rule. Weigh partnering for aid against perishing alone. Then decide if swapping company for sustenance was vice or necessity. We rose from debris dwellers to U.S. nationals, from rivals to comrades, from lost youth to resolute adults. Our inheritance goes beyond thriving unions. It validates how conflict's wreckage can birth harmony's foundations." The hall burst into a prolonged standing cheer. American spouses, children of mixed heritage, and German wives came together to honor the remarkable everyday women who spanned impossible divides. The narrative of German women and U.S. soldiers in the aftermath of World War II goes beyond mere national accounts. It highlights the profound ability of people to form bonds amid formal bans, to foster affection despite lingering animosity, and to construct anew amid widespread ruin. These women, some who wed Americans and others who labored beside them, played key roles in what ranks as one of the most effective military occupations ever. Their bonds, spanning from urgent survival tactics to heartfelt courtships, softened the edges of past foes and paved the way for mutual understanding. The shift from the frantic interactions of 1945 to the collaborative ties of 1955 mirrored Germany's own path from vanquished adversary to steadfast democratic partner. What started as personal links grew into symbols of global harmony. In our time, offspring from these pairings hold positions in armed forces, foreign services, and global bodies across the planet. They bear a blended legacy that fosters insight between cultures. They demonstrate how, out of conflict's wreckage, unforeseen unity can arise. The German women encountering U.S. soldiers during the spring of 1945 never dreamed their meetings would spark shifts that altered both nations. Their minds were fixed on mere endurance, securing meals, evading assault, safeguarding loved ones. Still, those personal choices built into a momentum that shaped eras. Ultimately, this is the core insight of the past. Monumental shifts stem from solitary choices. A famished woman taking sweets from an isolated trooper. A guard overlooking rules against mingling. A cleric sanctioning a prohibited union. Such quiet kindnesses piled up to drive sweeping evolution. The debris-clearing women of 1945 evolved into the connectors of 1955, their path from anguish to self-respect, from mere existence to belonging, from foe to kin stands as one of the 20th century's most striking evolutions. They showed that amid the bleakest epochs, ties between humans persist, evolve, and eventually surpass the walls that separate us. Their inheritance thrives not in figures, but in households stretching across lands, in offspring fluent in several tongues, in descendants who find harmony in dual German and American identities. They affirmed that affection, no matter its tangled roots, can overcome the most profound resentments. The ink pen that captured Ingrid Becker's initial thoughts on Americans in March 1945 would eventually pen missives to Iowa about her fresh life in the States. The change was total. The subdued had turned into relatives, the subjugated had gained full rights, the opponents had become intimate partners. That shift, echoed countless times in private stories, redirected the arc of events. Out of total war's debris rose not only material renewal, but also mended human relations. The German women and U.S. soldiers who connected amid the disorder of oversight forged from devastation an outcome unimaginable to either group. Enduring harmony rooted in intimate links, their tale serves as a prompt that history's major turns often ignite not in assemblies or grand halls, but in basic human exchanges where old rivals uncover their common essence. In the controlled zones of Germany, that realization kicked off with a treat of chocolate, a grin, a twirl on the dance floor, and concluded with lineages bridging seas and eras that personified accord. The German women navigating the American oversight didn't merely observe the unfolding of time. They reshaped it via myriad personal gestures of bravery, concession, and linkage. Their imprint lingers in each transatlantic gathering, every child versed in 2 languages, every instance where once hostile figures greet as companions. They were unexceptional women facing exceptional trials who illustrated that people's endurance and flexibility can turn even the gloomiest pages of the past into pathways to brighter tomorrows. Their arc from wreckage to harmony stands as evidence of humanity's strength in surmounting the rifts that time forges. When all is weighed, the account of German women and U.S. soldiers in post-war Germany defies simple romance or sorrow alone. It mirrors all of human chronicle, intricate, at odds with itself, and in the end, redemptive. From the abyss of loss and need sprang ties that aided in remolding the world after the war, affirming that even amid devastation, people devise means to restore not only structures, but the connections among groups. The oversight formally concluded in 1955. Yet its personal aftermath persists in the millions of heirs blending German and American roots, in the profound bond between countries once fierce rivals, and in the evidence that from battle's havoc can spring harmony's most surprising edifices, households that cross the gaps history imposes, offspring who represent accord and affection that overcomes the limits of nations, speech, dialect, plus the sour,